My name is Robert,
My name is Chris.
and you're listening to Working as Designed.
Yay.
All right, let's get into it. Episode 2. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think every developer hates to talk about, something that we're all asked to do on a regular basis, and we all suck at it, and that is estimating. Chris, I want to pull up a meme here, one that I think really embodies the struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's throw that up on camera real quick. There's a funny meme here of developers basically wishing that they could travel back in time to estimate something perfectly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've all used the time machine analogy like several times. They're just like, just give me a time machine just so I can get it all done.
Yeah, but I think the thing that we forget is I don't think any amount of time traveling is gonna make us estimate well. I feel like no matter what we do, estimating is hard. Why do you think that is?
I mean, a lot of times it's a lot of variables, right? It's unknowns. It's, you might think that you know what you're doing, and then you get into it, and then you don't. Like, so the question is, like, how much planning do you do, too,
Yeah, I mean, is it possible to estimate well? Or is...
Okay, I guess maybe before we get too far, what kind of estimates are you talking about?
Well, I mean, whether it's points or hours, I think at its core, estimating reflects time. Like you can abstract it away in points, but points, I mean, at some point they translate into like physical time.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about it in the very abstract sense, like quantifying time for a project. Have you ever seen a team estimate well?
I think so. Funny thing.
Yeah.
So our first software job, right? We got within 1% of estimates for the year.
I don't remember. Like, really? 1%?
1%. I don't know how we did it.
Did we estimate in hours or points?
Hours.
I feel like...
But you got to remember, the tenure of that team, like, we worked together as a solid team for 4 or 5 years by that point.
Well, and the work was repetitive.
Right. Yeah. So it was very calculated. It was very rinse and repeat, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to build this page. Well, everything is already like laid out in some sort of golden standard of like, here you go.
Yeah. So, okay. I hear you. If I'm doing the same thing every single day, I can see a scenario where I get really good at estimating, but then you're not really estimating. You're just
quoting.
You're just quoting what you know it takes. I'm talking about you've never done it before. How do you estimate that well? Or can you? Or is it just, should we just give up? Should we just throw out random numbers and
I mean, developer me is like, who cares? Just give me all the time in the world, right?
We've done that before. Well, first off, is estimating in your opinion, because you've been a developer, you're now a manager. Is estimating important?
Always.
To you?
Yeah.
Why?
So as manager me, right, I need to know if the team's actually getting work done, right? And how much work that they're able to do and how much they're able to consume, right? And part of it, the way I always try to look at it too, is also in terms of equity, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, so like that one person isn't overdoing it over somebody else.
Oh.
Right? Because like, so all the developers at our different skill level, that's fine. What might take you 3 hours takes me 2. But that's fine, right? So the expected is I'm expected to get more output done than what you probably would. And output is subjective, right? Because 40 hours of work or 30 hours of work, whatever the metric is for how much development time you should get done is different, right?
Yeah.
But it's equitable time, right? And if you're not achieving your potential or your expectation, then where does that time go, right? Am I taking it on, or is it going somewhere else?
You manage, how many teams do you manage?
I mean,
3?
I'm gonna say 2,
well,
but technically it should be 3.
You have 2 in-house dev teams, an in-house DevOps team, like an SRE team.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you have a contracting team. You have 4 teams.
Yeah, that team I need to manage better, but sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, how do they feel about estimating? Is it like
Oh, they hate it. They hate it. It's the worst, right? So it all kind of, but like honestly, it's how the teams approach estimates is what they hate, right?
how do they like? So wait, they hate how they approach it. Are they how do they approach it?
Well, so honestly, like obviously we're trying different techniques now, right? But the things that was always given to them was, the way that we've evolved, right? At the beginning, when I first started as a developer, or we're currently at, was, hey, here's an hour meeting. Let me tell you all the stuff that I know about it, and these are the modifications. In 45 minutes is precursor. 10 minutes of, hey, this is what's new. Give me a number.
We're gonna call that the dump truck model, where you literally just dump an entire project on a team, and you expect them to give a full estimate.
Yeah, that's anywhere between like a couple days to like 3 months worth of work.
Yeah, I guess it's worth pointing out that we're talking about projects that are hundreds of hours generally.
I guess that's important context, right? So the teams that I work with, the average timeline for a project is about 1 month.
Okay.
Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. Sometimes right now we're working through a 9-month project, right? But like for me, that's the abnormal. There's a whole nother development side in our company, and they go anywhere between like 3 months and 9 months. Like they're usually long-term projects that full implementation, really understanding like deep knowledge of what's going on.
So back to the team hating how they estimate. You talked about this dump truck model where they just literally get information thrown at them and produce an estimate. How have they iterated on that and improved on estimating? Because I'm assuming they're not doing that still.
No, God, no.
Yeah.
So what has changed is, and again, part of it was me pushing it to some degree, was getting our product owner to stop thinking that way and giving the team time to consume and understand. Right. So then we broke that up into 2 different parts. One is an introduction, and then number 2 is the estimate. Right. So they introduce it, they kind of, again, give that context of what it is now. If the team still needs more context, then at least like there's a break in between this session and next session, and that they can go do their own investigation to try to come up with numbers.
So the intro and the estimation, those are days apart.
Generally,
okay.
Yeah, at least one.
At least one. So you introduce a project to them. It gives them time to digest it.
Yeah.
And then a day or 2 goes by, and then they estimate it.
And then they get thrown into a meeting again, right? Given a 1-hour time slot, give me all the numbers right now.
Okay. And so that's the second evolution.
Right. And even sometimes that feels, and again, all of the thing, right, is that feels too rushed sometimes.
How much, like, okay, let's paint an ideal picture. Like, what does idealistic estimating look like?
Well, honestly, to me, I think idealistic is put it on my schedule, right?
Like, take as much time as you need?
Well, it's not take as much time as I need, but it's, hey, here's a project. This is what needs to be delivered. Tell me the solution that you're looking for, right? Tell me why. Give me the context. I'll help fill in gaps if I need to fill in technical gaps or whatever it is. And tell me, hey, like I need an estimate by end of day tomorrow, end of day or end of week, right? So that I can plan my days around it rather than getting interrupted and having to change. So like I'm a huge advocate of cognitive load, right? Like you can only retain so much, and as soon as you detract somebody from an idea, it's going to take them so much more time to ramp up and investigate and try to learn, right? I mean, we've worked with a couple developers that, like, if you were to say, hey, give me an estimate, it'll take them a half a day because they have to ramp it down from what they're currently doing, spend an hour or 2 ramping up to what they are trying to find out, cobble their ideas together, and then now you got to spin down and back up again.
Yeah.
Right. And if you put it on somebody else's schedule or saying like, hey, you set that expectation of this is when I need this thing delivered, then they can work their day out of, okay, like I know I'm going to be most effective figuring this out in the morning or most effective at near end of day or whatever they need to get it done.
Yeah. I think perhaps Because you and I are different. You and I are comfortable in a room just spitballing. I mean, we've estimated 2,000-hour projects together with a whiteboard and Post-it notes.
I mean, at least $500,000 projects at least. So, like, it's not like they're small in any kind.
Yeah, and I think maybe our style of estimating has influenced how we estimate as an organization. But it's interesting that maybe it's maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know, but like just the idea of putting people on the spot in a meeting to give an estimate is probably not the most effective way.
I mean, it probably wasn't done either. You know, I mean, it always brought anxiety to people.
I enjoy that though. I enjoy the.
Well, but here's the thing, right? So when we're doing it, it's you and I in a room, right? We are sitting there thinking technically as developers.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right, as opposed to having a meeting of 5 different roles sitting there. Of you got your QA, you got your developer, you got your product owner, whoever else is present, and the conversation you and I have is not fruitful for everybody else there. Right, so they're trying to gather their thoughts, but they're hearing a different conversation, and again, it detracts from what people are trying to do.
It does seem that in those estimation meetings that one person or 2 people dominate the meeting and the other people just kind of shriek back, and it stops being like a collaborative thing, and it's just
well, in a lot of cases it's a lot more experience, right? Some people don't want to speak up, right? Or again, they don't feel equipped to answer the questions, so they don't want to give an answer or be held to an answer that they don't feel good about.
Yeah, I popped into one of the estimation meetings recently, and I could clearly tell everybody was confused, but nobody wanted to say anything. They all just were like, "Well, I guess it's a week," and it's like, "Well, what do you guys need to have confidence in this?" Yeah, let's talk about hours versus points, because I get really confused. Like, because to me, I'm thinking to myself, sure, let's call it points, but like at the end of the day, it translates into time. So what is the reasoning behind estimating in points versus hours?
Yeah, so I've never estimated in points. I will preface that, but my understanding of it is to abstract away the hours, right? And this is to get back to the same thing, like a 2 to a 3 to you and I, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've done estimates in this particular way, right? You have like a 1, 2, 3, like through Fibonacci, and like a 1 is a configuration, a 3 is a new data element, a 5 is a new page, or whatever it is, right? And that has a particular, that ranking has a particular meaning of what it means or the complexity that's entailed into it.
What do you mean by that?
For the complexity?
Yeah, like how to explain that more? You're saying those numbers relate to complexity. How do they relate?
Yeah, so I mean, it's how much effort, how much work needs to go into it, right? So like I'm thinking in terms of, let's say you have a search screen, right? You already have the data elements, you're already capturing the data. You just need to make a screen that can rip through that data and present something meaningful, right? Usually things like that, not that complicated, depending on the system that you're building, but like they can be pretty straightforward. As opposed to like a data entry screen, right? Sometimes they're very straightforward, or sometimes, they have a lot of validation rules, or they have a lot of business logic that has to be into, like, if you're calculating money or things like that, like that's going to be more complicated.
So 1 would be the easiest thing you could possibly do. A 40, or I don't know what the highest number is, would be the hardest thing you could do. And then you basically figure out where does everything fit in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, though, that gets converted into time, which time is measured in hours. So why points? Why not just, this is what we do at work.
Right.
We estimate Fibonacci in hours.
So yeah, so a sprint has some sort of defined timeline, right?
Yeah.
Generally about 2 weeks, typically. I mean, depends on your team and what you need to do. And you generate velocity, right? Just like you would do with hours, just like you would do with points. And the idea is that you're always hitting velocity and gaining velocity as you're sprinting along.
So your velocity might be 80 story points.
Right.
And that 80 is different than
that team's 60 or something like that.
Okay. So I could see a scenario. So if if it's a degree of difficulty and not time, those story points could essentially apply to another team, but that team would just have a higher velocity.
Right, they'll get more done.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that is the benefit, I guess, of using points on hours, because if we estimated in hours, you couldn't just like a 30-hour project to you is not. It's like maybe a 60-hour project to me.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. But I mean, like, so, but that's where it gets funny, right? Is what kind of work are you doing, and what are you able to handle, right? Because I feel like what we're in is we want our teams. I mean, we have our teams estimate their work, right? So that they are accountable and that they can really have a say in the work that they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So if they're going to say it's going to take me a day to do it, okay, you got a day to do it, right? But like transferring it to, but the translation to another team, right? We don't have that. I mean, we probably do if we really looked at it, but the transform of what is the calculation, what's going to be the time difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the way because we estimate in hours, and I think the way we account for that is, well, a team just is not operating at 100%. Like at 100% is 6 hours a day per person.
Yeah.
We might say, well, the team's at 80% or they're at 70%. So we sort of account for those variations through that. But yeah, I could see story points being like making a legitimate case for it.
Yeah.
So we talked about good estimation is giving the team time to do estimation, not just putting them on the spot in a meeting.
Well, and the other thing too, I'd also say with it as well is, you know, when you asked about like, you know, how am I figuring out estimates? I'm never going to estimate something that I can't I can't figure out. Right. So whenever I throw an estimate at a problem, I at least have a solution in mind. It might not be the best solution, but it's at least a solution.
Yeah. Okay. But you don't know 100% how you're going to do it.
Oh gosh, no. But I have at least one idea of how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I can at least draw a map from A to B, but like I might be stopping at Starbucks or Wendy's or who knows where I'm going, but like I'm going to get there. And then you see, you know, and then I feel like that's our dynamic when we estimate things. Well, okay, you see the map from A to B, but now like, you know, you're stopping at Taco Bell instead. Yeah. And nowhere else.
Chipotle.
Yeah. Better one.
Yeah.
Sponsor him, please. But and that's where we can talk about our maps, right? What's different? How do we understand this different? Like, do we even understand that we're going to the same destination in the first place?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think that's a big thing people avoid because they think that everybody's on the same page. But really, once you tell everyone like, hey, what's your understanding of that project? It could be different. You never know.
Yeah. Do you think a project can ever be too large? And I say this in jest because we've estimated like stupidly large projects, but like at some point is a project so large that you're basically just guessing.
I mean, isn't that all it is?
Well, no, it's no.
Okay. So I mean, I know we throw this around the office a lot, right? You know, between an estimate, a guesstimate, and an educated guess. Like, what's the difference between all three of those?
I mean, like you described earlier, an estimate, you kind of have an idea how you're going to do it. But when a project is so large, where it's years, we've estimated year-long projects. Like, at some point, is it even worth it to do that? Or is an estimate just turning into a time box at that point?
I mean, it has to, right?
Yeah.
So going back to one of the products that we just built within the past couple of years, like, it was a year-long project. We had no idea what we were doing. Like, and we decided to explore new technologies with that too.
Yeah, I remember the team was mad when we asked them to estimate it. They hated the idea. How are we going to estimate a 2-year-long endeavor?
Yeah.
I'm curious why, from your perspective, why you think they were frustrated with it.
I mean, honestly, from there, I think it's just a lot of unknown, right? Yeah. There's a lot of stock to be set in the team having experience in the technology, or at least being proficient enough in the technology before they start something.
Yeah. They did not want to estimate MongoDB because they didn't know it.
Yeah.
is that a
fault? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, or you estimate for the unknown, and then you estimate for when you do know it.
Okay, you bring up a good point. You're estimating with the assumption you know what you're doing. So you have that little chunk of uncertainty at the beginning of the project.
And it might be a lot of chunk of uncertainty, but like still, but I'm making time for myself to do it.
And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna pretend like I'm an expert. And now, based on me being an expert, this is how long it should take me to do it.
Or proficient even.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That's a and maybe that only comes with time and experience, but I feel like that's not how people estimate. Like, I've seen developers estimate where they're like, I don't know how to do this, and I need to do it 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. I'm gonna make it a large, and then I'm gonna multiply that by 7. And it's like, well, no, by the 3rd or 4th time, this is gonna be a walk in the park.
Right.
So let's just estimate some time to learn. Let's assume we're proficient, and now we got this thing on rinse and repeat.
Right. Yeah. I mean, also part of that too is understanding that, again, this is back how far do you plan in the future, right? Because if you know you're going to do it 7 times, well, okay, the first one's going to take forever.
Yeah.
But everything after that's going to be da-da-da-da.
And for what it's worth, that team eventually started being confident in that, but I feel like they had to experience the success before they felt confident that they could estimate as though they were successful. Whereas you and I were probably more like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Like, we did that with translations. When we, you know, I had the brilliant idea to translate the entire application into 3 different languages, and we had no clue what we were doing. But like, we're like, well, if we can build this black box to do everything,
mm-hmm.
then this other part, implementing it, is like 2 minutes each or 3 minutes each.
Right.
But building the black box, we're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I like to use the analogy, if you locked me in a room, how many days would it take to do it? And I felt like, after a month, we could probably have it built. Yeah, so that project was difficult too, because I remember the lead that we had on it, like, he really struggled with any degree of uncertainty.
Yeah, he was not nice guy.
Yeah,
real nice guy, easy to talk to,
smart too.
Yeah. But it was, and this is a topic for another time.
Yeah.
But the high pressure situation.
Yeah.
Right. Is how do you deal and identify a workplace that's like that, and can you do it?
Yeah.
But
if there was he was the epitome of I cannot, not even I won't, I physically can't give you an estimate on the spot. I need to take a nap, meditate, read, come back to me in 2 weeks, and I'll give you a ballpark like that.
Well, he's not the only developer but that person isn't the only developer that we've experienced that with.
Yeah.
There's other ones too. And again, I don't know, like you said, I don't know if that's generational. I don't know, if it's literally just the background that they come from, but some of the people that are highly analytical, right? They just need time. And again, this back to the very first comment. You need time to consume and understand, right? Because if you were to ask that person on the spot, I need an estimate right now. Sure, they might feel pressured and give you something, but it ain't going to be good.
Okay, let's explore this, because there is oftentimes tension between the business and the dev team. And a lot of times that tension comes from, I need an estimate right now, and the team gives an estimate
because they feel like they have to.
And that estimate is generally
garbage.
Well, I would say specifically it's inflated. And the business gets frustrated because, I can't go to the client with this estimate. And the team's like, yeah, but you've given me a day to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or less.
Yeah. So you've been in a lot of those situations. How do you navigate that situation where you're being asked what we're going to assume is the impossible? Give me an estimate, and you have 24 hours to do it. What do you do?
If I don't have enough information, I'm going to start asking a ton of questions. If you're asking me to do that, you have to make yourself available, whether you want it or not, right?
Yeah, and generally that prompt shows the business that this is a bigger thing than they might think.
Right.
Because you're asking, like, and a lot of times, especially when you work for a business where,
And I should say, this is the ideal scenario, right? This isn't like what always happens.
yeah. But when you work for a business where the owner was a developer and maybe the way that he's envisioning or she's envisioning something is built is very different than it's built today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, when I think back to how long that used to take, I could get that done in a day. But they're not thinking about how it's done today.
All the overhead,
all the complexities, all the moving parts. When you start asking those questions and you help them by asking the questions, you help them to see the complexity of it, and you can sort of build this empathy with business and with management. But if you just say, I can't do that, don't ask me to do that, it's hard for the business to be empathetic towards you.
Yeah.
But just by asking questions, like valid questions, you can help eliminate that toxicity. And for what it's worth, in this times I've seen you do that, the business has generally been receptive to it. Like, oh, I get it. It's more complicated than I originally thought.
Yeah. Or sometimes they're like, no, you're overcomplicating it, because I do that sometimes.
Because we do.
Yeah. But that's an easy thing to get into, right? Because sometimes, again, how far do you plan in the future, right? Like right now is a key example that we have 3 or 4 projects that are just jumbled in the wrong order, right? Like the client is asking for this feature, or they brought this feature up first, and it's such a small piece. But then as you get further and further down, they're like, hey, we want you to refactor this entire part of the module. Well, shoot, maybe we should talk about that first.
Yeah.
Because then everything after that becomes easier.
So how do you, because you don't want to blue sky the project to death. So how do you handle that?
So that's hard, right? The question is, who's in the know?
What do you mean?
Well, so like, okay, so in my role, right, I'm aware of these projects that are coming down the pipeline.
Your role.
So
being...
my role as manager,
yeah, okay.
or architect, or whatever it is, whatever my role is in that room at the time, right? And now I didn't do it when our UI UX person did it, but like, they're like, this is backwards. Like, what are we doing? You know, like, this is crazy. You know, and once we started talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, like, this makes total sense. We should do the refactor first, so everything becomes easier afterwards.
Do you think?
And if the team got that, honestly, the team got one part of the microcosm, and that's all that was presented to them. So they didn't have visibility on what's going on.
So without seeing the larger refactor that the UI team was looking forward to, the team's estimate was basically going.
What's right now?
It was going to be wrong no matter what.
Right.
Yeah.
And honestly, like this part of the system was done on our legacy code base. So we would have had if we proceeded in the route that we were going, we were going to do twice the amount of work.
Yeah. And how did you identify that?
I didn't.
The UI team did.
The UI team did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know that last project was even on the horizon.
That's how you know you got a good UI team, when they're looking out for the developers.
Well, they're also looking out for themselves. Like, this is dumb.
Yeah, I suppose. That's awesome, man.
But like that's not always. So again, this is probably something that's unique to us. But like, it's, how do you plan for that?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, because I'm so far removed now from the code, I don't understand how long it takes to do anything anymore. I'm just kind of taking people at their word. But if an estimate comes in higher than I think is acceptable, because the reality is, whether I know how long it's going to take or not, I have an idea in my head.
Yeah.
And if the delta of that from what it is to what I think it is so great, I might ask the question, hey, why does it take 2 months to build a list with some edit and deletes?
Mm-hmm.
And they might say, well, it's because we need to refactor this, or we need to do X, Y, Z.
But if they shrug their shoulders, then it's like, well, then what are you planning on doing?
Yeah, but like the point I'm trying to make is, if they communicate to me, hey, we need to refactor this, and I'm like, well, can we do it without the refactor? Can we reuse what we have? I don't want them to just say yes. I want them to say, sure, but if we do that, here's the risk, and like, let me understand why the refactor is necessary.
And I should say, what's unique to us, and maybe it's not, I hope it's not unique to us, but I think to some degree it is, like, our motto has in there that we have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients. right? Like we're not trying to just, again, yeah, it's government contract. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, just take their money, like not big, in the space that we're in, like that is precious resource to them. And I mean, to us, like it's unethical for us to ask any more than what it needs to be.
Yeah, when you say fiduciary, what you mean, and because a lot of people probably don't use that word on a day-to-day basis, you mean that it is we always act in our client's best interest.
The best we can.
Yes.
And honestly, and again, this goes back to the earlier talk that we had at some point. How do we see software? Right? It's a tool. It's not going to be there forever. Like the fiscally responsible thing might be just hire a temp to do your data entry.
I remember we gave a quote for something, and you're like, sure, you could pay us $100,000 to do this, or you could get a temp
for like a month or two and just get it done.
Yeah, they wanted to throw like six figures at us for a problem that wasn't going to be around for a month.
Right.
That's like that. Yeah, software is a utility. I'm gonna go back to my episode 1 plastic fork analogy. Like it's a means to an end. It's not the end in and of itself. It's meant to solve a problem, and the answer to the problem might not be let's rewrite this in React. It might be, hey, let's keep the legacy code around. And
yeah, again, like as a developer, sure, that's gonna frustrate me, but like but like once you, again, right, it's how much ownership do you have over the system, and how much can you devoid yourself from the problem, right? Like the code isn't there for me; it's for somebody else.
Yeah, I don't think I think developer the and maybe I'm overgeneralizing this, but I think the common thought is this is my baby. Like the code
for some people it is.
Yeah, like I want to own that. I mean, that's what most developers want. Like I want to own this piece and I want to be proud of it. And when you ask them to make compromises like that for the sake of estimation, it's really hard to do that. Like,
right. Some developers that we work with, they have a hard time understanding legacy stuff. And the only way for them to understand is to rewrite it for their minds. Now, again, this is back to my philosophy, right? Cognitive load, right? You're not writing it for yourself. You're writing it for everyone else around you. So and a lot of that is just being a good team member. It's understanding empathy and how people understand things.
And risk too. Because if you're going to rewrite something, it doesn't matter how great it is. You've introduced a ton of risk. You have onboarded a lot of developers.
More than I probably should have. Yes.
Yeah. How do you teach them how to estimate? Are they just like a wallflower for the first like 6 months, or do you actually show them how to estimate?
Okay, so I'm a jerk and I tell them, you tell me what your estimate is first, and then I'll tell you what mine is.
But are they wrong? Do you say
all the time?
No, but do you tell them they're wrong?
No, so it's a difficult conversation, right? Sometimes, because if you ask them, well, why did you think that? I don't know, it's just a number that I had.
Then they're wrong. That's
right.
Yeah, that's an example.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's to start that cultivation of thought, right? Okay, if you say it's going to take a day, what are you going to do? Why do you think it's going to be a day? Yeah. It's all those challenging, critical pieces of information.
So you don't care what the number is. You care how they came up with it, and you're teaching them how to create a number.
Yeah.
Not what is because there is no right number. An estimate is a very personal and intimate thing. But if you put no thought into it, then it's wrong.
It's always going to be wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and then also like the other things too is what I try to advocate for my teams to do is look back at past work. Now again, it's a practice that they're not consistent in.
Yeah.
But it's, hey, like I'm going to do this project, right? It's all compare and contrast, right? That's really in my mind, that's the best you can do. We did this project. It's about the same as this project. Do they feel the same?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because a lot of times, so we've produced some large estimates for our company, and it's common for the business to say, this doesn't pass the sniff test. That's what the owner generally says. Like, this doesn't pass the sniff test. Justify your estimates. So then we go through this exercise where we put everything on Post-it notes on a whiteboard, and we start comparing things relative to one another. Forget hours.
Yeah. Again, complexity.
Yeah, like is this as difficult as this? If the answer is yes, put them in the same column. And then we find something else. Is it more or less? And it just becomes this game of relativistic estimating.
Right. And then at some point, every 5 or 10, then we just like, hey, do we still feel gut check?
Yeah. And then this beautiful thing happens. And I love this part of how when we estimate. Then we find a column and we give it a number.
Just one.
And then everything just like
half or double or whatever it is.
The estimates just reveal themselves to you. That is, to me, that's such a better way of estimating because you sort of remove the idea of time and you're only thinking about it in terms of complexity.
Right.
And then you just say, okay, let's pick the 5 column, the 5 degree of difficulty, and let's say that's a week or that's 2 weeks. And then the 8, you just multiply it by whatever the percentage is, and you get an estimate. And then it's really hard for the business to say the estimate's too high because you've gone through the effort of basically determining degrees of difficulty of everything. And then when they say, well, why is that a month? Well, it's a month because we've agreed that this is a week, and this is 4 times as complicated. And you can sort of talk through that. I love that exercise, and I wish developers did it more.
Well, we're going to try it this week, so
yeah.
This is probably going to come out after we do it, but
yeah. So there's a project where, it's so backwards, and this is so common,
and for us at least.
For us, yeah, and it's fine. I've accepted it, but we get a budget. Well, we determine the budget
to some degree,
and
well, honestly, for this project, we were given a date. Budget didn't matter.
Yeah. So we have a time box and we have a money box, and we're basically, we have to agree to that, and we agree to some scope, and we kind of do a gut check of
is this even doable?
Is this doable? And then once they sign the contract, and it's funny when I say it out loud, this sounds stupid, but once they sign the contract, then we do the exercise that I just described. We probably should have did the exercise before they signed the contract.
Yeah, well, and honestly, and this is where we talked, right? So when we did the exercise, the team wasn't present.
Yeah.
Right? It was a bunch of people feeling like we know what the team's going to do.
Ironically, none of them are going to be the ones doing the work, maybe except for you in some cases.
Yeah. But that's because I am the manager that will
do the work.
I don't feel like I'm leading unless I'm in the trenches with people. So
yeah, it's a good mindset to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different mindset than
there
not
is,
a lot of people prescribe to that. I don't think
there are some memes that are floating around the office about you. What was the one they used to say about you? Like, that'll take me.
Oh yeah, that'll take me 2 days or a day or something, but don't ask me to do it. Oh no, sorry, that'll take me 15 minutes, but don't ask me to do it.
Don't ask me to. Yeah, that Chris would say that all the time. But you really could do it in 15 minutes.
I know.
I believe in you.
I know. Well, or if it doesn't, then you'll never know. So
yeah.
Except it'll be done tomorrow morning, so it'll be fine. So we're talking about a lot of large scale estimates. Like, what do you do for small scale?
So my favorite way to estimate for small stuff, and this is just kind of how I think about it, is am I gonna have it done before lunch?
Yes.
Am I gonna have it? Yeah. Am I gonna have it done before dinner? Like. And I don't estimate tasks greater than 6 hours. It's either I'm gonna. So sorry.
If you can't finish it before your cup of coffee.
Yeah. So cup of coffee. I'm gonna drink a cup of coffee, and by the time I'm done with it, it's gonna be done. That's like a 1 or a 2. And then am I gonna get it done before lunch? That's a 3 or a 4. And then am I gonna get it done before dinner? That's a
full day.
A full day. Yeah. That's food. Yeah.
That's
how I estimate.
Yeah. What's funny is that's how I tell all the new people is it's hard to think about numbers. It's easy to think about food.
Yeah. And it's not so precise. Like, I hate when developers say that's a 30-minute test. Like, it's not. You don't know if it's 30 minutes. Yeah. Like,
is it before lunch or is it after stand up?
Yeah.
That's
a good way to think about it. So yeah, that's how small stuff's easy.
Well, it's not, but because the small stuff creeps it. So again, this is a thing that we do specifically to us, right? You got your size versus your estimate versus your sprint. Before you get into this, explain this spaghetti of
how we estimate stuff at work because it goes
Well,
in
sometimes
phases.
it's fettuccine, sometimes it's angel hair, sometimes it's
it's
and then do you want Alfredo or
can I give a high level of it and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you
do
can tell.
that.
Okay, so there I think we do three like depths of estimating. There's the quote where it's just a budget and it's usually estimated in terms of sprints.
Is that a quote?
It's a size that we tell our clients it's going to be $30,000 and it might as well be a quote because if we quote them 32,
Right, because again they have to get
Yeah.
approval for that funding to be spent.
yeah, so
And they have
it's-
to justify it to their funder to even get the money in the first place.
It's really a quote. We call it a size. Everybody hates it. I don't know why we do it because and this is human nature. The moment you tell somebody it's going to cost a certain amount, you're anchored to that. Like you have to come in at or under that, or you gotta maneuver that very difficult conversation.
So what's funny is, do you ever read Pragmatic Programmer?
I should have, but no, I haven't.
So there's a whole chapter in there about estimation, right?
What do they say?
So they say you should estimate in the terms that you're planning on delivering.
What does that mean?
So like if you were to tell somebody, hey, I'm going to estimate it in 30 days, or I can do it in 30 days, well, now it's 60 days, now you're screwed. But if you say it's going to take it 1 month, if you do 2 months, not that big of a deal, right? It's the magnitude of size of what you're estimating.
Like the precision, what unit of measure do you give them?
Right.
If you estimate in, so 30 to 60 days is mentally.
It's a ton. You doubled your estimate.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
if you go from 2 to 3 months, then you know what I mean? It's not as bad.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. Okay. So yeah. And
that's kind of what we try to do. We try to do it as a quote unquote shirt size.
yeah.
It's a large, extra large.
But
So we do that internally, and then we turn around and give them a dollar amount.
and yeah.
And then that's kind of because now we put it to a different term.
So we give this ballpark, and really what it's intended to do is to just make sure that we're
It's the warm and feels to the client if we say it's going to be 6 months worth of work, do they even have reasonable budget for 6 months worth of work?
it's like shopping for like a Lamborghini versus like a Chevy Cobalt. Like we want to make sure that we can, like, if we're gonna build a Lamborghini, we want to make sure that you weren't coming to the dealership with $20,000. So we say it's a 6-figure project, and they're like, well, how much? Because we got to go back to our funders, and we're like, well, it's about $150,000.
Right.
Well, we might as well written that in stone because they're immediately going back to their funders and they're saying,
because that's not a quick process, and well, sometimes it is, but generally it's not.
yeah, it's this. And for those of you who, and you can probably tell, this is all government work, so it takes months of getting budgets approved, and in some cases it's very difficult. So, the budget might get approved, and then there's like 3 months to build it. Well, if it's going to take you 6 months to do it, we gotta give an estimate before
because the funding has to be spent by a certain time of year.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. So, and we do a okay job navigating it, but we give this ballpark, which is used to determine budget. Then we start getting requirements. We start to think about it, and then we generate
And having the client think about it too.
Yeah, for the first time sometimes. Then we generate this thing called a statement of work, which a statement of work has the scope defined, it's got the phases defined,
The acceptance criteria.
That really should be the first time they see a number, but to generate that takes so much time, like where they can't wait, their funder can't wait.
Yeah.
So we give them this ballpark.
So I know you're kind of discussing at the time. How much time is it to generate a ballpark? Like how much time we're spending on it?
We probably spend a few days to generate the ballpark. And then we
just some initial questions, some high level. Hey, we kind of has to do this, this, and this.
Yeah, and it's usually based on anecdote. No real thought has gone into the fringe cases or the risk.
Super high level of
Yeah, I mean, I've been present in ballparks where it's like, do we think we can build this in a year? Yeah, okay, throw $1 million on it, and it's like a year to a year and a half is a big deal in that. So yeah, we spend a very little time. Usually because we have to. There's like 4 days to respond to an RFP. An RFP is basically somebody saying we want to build something. tell us what you think it's going to take to build it.
And what's interesting about government or contract is it's open.
But it has to be because it's
because
tax
they have
dollars.
to get the competitive. Yeah.
Yep. So you can go and look at all of the RFPs in a particular sector, and you could technically bid on them. And that's what we do. We bid on RFPs, and sometimes we don't know about the RFP until it's due in a week, and it's a $2 million budget, and we're like, can we do it $2 million? And the answer is always optimistically yes. But so that's not the statement of work though. That's
no, right. That's just the.
So we generate those very fast. The quotes or the ballparks. Then we do a statement of work that takes months to produce because we're sitting down with the client, we're asking questions, we're figuring out all the fringe cases.
We're designing a solution. Yes. So then we do that. So there's two estimates there: the ballpark and the statement of work. Statement of work is gospel. It's locked in. The quote is sort of locked in. Like you're going to disappoint the client if you come to them with a higher number, but there's still room to increase that or decrease it. Roughly same area.
Once that statement of work is generated, that's all
signed off.
That's all we're going to get. If we quote them a month and it takes us 2, we eat that month. It's a loss, and we've done that in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So then we do that. Then we create stories and tasks, and the team thinks about how they're going to build it.
Because the SOW still might not have all the fringe cases. It's
Yes.
just going to have what we've thought about the solution so far, and then now we get our QA really. Well, this is how we do it. Then our QA really gets involved. The team gets involved as part of the SOW.
Yeah, they generate.
They're present.
Yeah.
They're present after the solution's been discussed with the client, the product owner. They all agree on it.
Yep.
It's ran through the architecture team, UI UX team, generally, hopefully.
But they might have only spent a few days or a week generating it, and that could be a year-long endeavor. Or like the project they're quoting in a week could amount to 52 weeks worth of work.
Right.
And then we get into, after the statement of work is signed, we get into planning meetings and grooming meetings and refinement meetings, and then we estimate a third time. And those estimates are generally higher in some cases or sometimes lower. And we're estimating a third time. And that's where I really struggle, because
what's the value of that third estimate?
What's the value of that third estimate? Because at the end of the day, we're locked into this quoted amount. And the value, I think, is that it helps build confidence in the quote. And if we do see we're deviating from it, it gives us a little bit of time to react to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the thing that we're, I don't want to say experimenting or doing now is, the difference between the estimate and how much time does it actually take. Because there's times that I know the team has done the work. They estimated it like 20 hours, so like 3 or 4 days of work. And they finish it in a half a day. So like way off. But when it comes to the quote, dead on, right? So like it's weird kind of seeing how those things deviate.
So what you're describing is, and the teams were like, they almost were given a false sense of like, we're doing great, because they quoted at 8 hours. Then so the SOW says 8 hours. Then in planning they say 20.
Because they're
thinking about it.
Complicating or whatever, yeah.
And then
or they're thinking about each other's experience, right? Because maybe the person that's the slowest at it isn't the person that picked it up. It's a person that really knows what they're doing.
Yeah, so they quoted at 8, they planned it for 20, and they get it done in 10. And then they're like, well, we planned it at 20, we did it in 10. Hooray! Never going back to the original quoted amount and realizing, well, we were 20% over. And it's kind of death by a million cuts when you do that, because if you never go back and you refer to the quote, you get to the end of the 6-month project and you're 3 weeks behind schedule.
Yeah.
So for planning is good, but where you come up with the 20, but you gotta look back at the 8. You gotta say, hey, are we overcomplicating this based on what we quoted it?
Right.
And that's the rub, and that's the most difficult thing about our job, I think, is estimating. So you do think someday we're going to get to a point where estimates are.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly, to some point, it's inevitable, right? I mean, honestly, and I've talked with, again, back in our current position, I've talked about, it's moving away from estimates and looking at more as quotes, right? Like, how does a mechanic quote their work? How do they estimate their work? Well, they've repaired 1,000 engines before.
Yeah.
They know what's going to entail in this.
I have a recent bad experience with a mechanic that quoted me 2,000 and then didn't fix it, and then I needed 3,000.
Now you tell them that they're a dick, and they hold them to the 2,000.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like there's some pieces and again, that's kind of the challenge that we have, right?
Yeah.
Is you can only approve the work that they give, right?
Yeah.
Like we quoted, we're held to it. You know, it's the same thing. Like if a mechanic says $2,000 to fix this, well, it's $2,000 to fix it.
Well, and I think what you want in that scenario is if the mechanic sees it's going to be more, you want transparency, communication,
right?
Which is what we try to do with our clients. If we see a project is starting to deviate from the quote, it's better to get ahead of that, have that conversation, and
otherwise you're going to get to the end and you're going to be like, I am out of time, and we're going to be late, and everyone's going to be mad.
Because one thing that I feel confident in is if the quote starts to get out of control, if the actual time spent gets out of control, I'm confident that I can design a solution to get back down to the estimate. Like we can always create a solution
if you know about it soon enough.
Yeah,
because once you get to the end, you have these last 5 things. Like you can't cut these last 5 things.
But that's where prioritization comes into play.
Right.
Like do the things they need, like first, and then at the end of the project have the nice to haves.
Yeah. Again, back to our translations project, right?
Oh yeah, we did not deliver a ton of functionality,
no.
but we
delivered the most important functionality.
Yep. We said, hey, there's a ton of uncertainty. We feel like we can meet 95% of this. This 5%. Maybe we get to it, but we're going to promise you that this last 5% is not critical to what you need. We're going to do the critical stuff first,
and we'll deliver it after the fact.
Yeah,
right. Like, is this what you really need for? Again, this is another client that we've been dealing with over the past couple months. Is this day 1 or is this day 30?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Do I need it right out of the gate, or can I get it a month or 2 after? And there's a lot of times there's a lot of value in waiting for the month or 2 because getting users to use the thing you're building can eliminate some of the uncertainty with the design that might be causing your estimates to be high.
Right, because again, even when we're designing a solution, I mean, again, how we do it, and I feel like a lot of other places, like you might think this is the best route with educated decisions and things like that, but when it comes down to brass tacks, did you really need it in the first place?
Yeah, you have no idea how your users are going to use the software until they start using it. So.
Yeah.
All right, well, that is it for episode 2 of Working as Designed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're starting to get the hang of this.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Well, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, share, and can't wait to see you guys next week.
Yeah.
See ya.